Legal rights every man must know. Imagine this. Tomorrow morning you walk into work, and by lunchtime you've lost your job. Why? Because you refused to do something you believed was seriously dangerous. Or imagine your relationship collapses. Suddenly you're being told, you're not seeing the kids. Or maybe it's 11:30 at night. Blue lights appear behind you. A police officer starts asking questions. And you have absolutely no idea what you legally have to say. Here's the scary part. These aren't crazy situations. They happen to ordinary men. Every single day. And when they happen, one thing can completely change what happens next. Knowing your rights. Because there are legal protections surrounding you right now that most men barely understand. And some of them are way more powerful than you probably realize. Today we're breaking down the legal rights every man should know, including what happens when you're arrested, what rights you may have as a father, what protections you have at work, what equality before the law actually means, and one enormous mistake people make when talking about human rights. And trust me, you need to know that last one. Let's get into it. 1. Your invisible shield. Before we go any further, understand something important. There isn't some secret book called Special Legal Rights for Men. Most of the rights we're talking about are universal. They apply to men, women, children, everyone. But here's why we're talking specifically about men. Because there are situations where men can find themselves particularly exposed to the legal system. Criminal proceedings, workplace accidents, military service, family breakdown, custody disputes, homelessness, imprisonment, and dangerous occupations. So think of your rights as an invisible shield. You might go years without needing it, but when your life suddenly goes sideways, you'll be very glad it's there. And one of the documents behind that shield was created after humanity witnessed some of the darkest events in history. 2. The document that changed everything. The Second World War had ended just 3 years earlier. Tens of millions were dead. Entire cities had been destroyed. The Holocaust had exposed horrifying crimes against humanity. And world leaders faced a massive question. How do we stop governments from treating human beings like they have no rights at all? The answer became one of the most important documents ever written, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, and its message was revolutionary. Human beings have fundamental rights simply because they're human. But here's where people make a huge mistake. The UDHR isn't generally something you can simply walk into your local court, wave around and say, Article 7, case closed. It is a declaration, not itself a universally enforceable domestic statute. Instead, it helps shape international treaties, constitutions, and national human rights laws around the world. And that's important, because the rights we're about to discuss aren't random internet theories. They're built around principles that help shape modern legal systems, starting with perhaps the biggest one of all. 3. Your freedom isn't a gift. Article 3 of the UDHR recognizes the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Those 3 words are massive, because they attack one of the most dangerous powers any government can possess. The power to simply take your freedom away. Imagine police could arrest you, lock you inside a cell, and never explain why. No accusation, no evidence, no hearing.
Nothing.
That's exactly why protections against arbitrary detention matter. Your liberty isn't supposed to disappear simply because somebody in authority decides they don't like you. But here's where things become even more serious. Because there's another protection that international law treats as absolutely fundamental. 4. Nobody gets to break you. Imagine being arrested. You're restrained. You're completely under somebody else's control. And someone decides, we'll hurt him until he talks. International human rights law draws an extraordinarily hard line here. Torture is prohibited. So is slavery. So is cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. And these protections matter to men in situations most of us hopefully never experience. Prisoners. Prisoners of war. Migrant workers trapped in forced labor. Victims of trafficking. Detainees. And male victims of serious abuse. Your humanity doesn't disappear because you're behind bars. It doesn't disappear because you're poor. And it doesn't disappear because you're a man. But now we get to one of the most controversial principles in this entire video. Equality. 5. The law is supposed to be blind. You've probably seen the statue. Lady Justice. Blindfolded. Holding scales. That blindfold represents an incredibly powerful idea. Who you are shouldn't determine the justice you receive. Article 7 of the UDHR states that all are equal before the law and entitled without discrimination to equal protection of the law. Sounds obvious, but reality can be much messier, because equal laws don't automatically guarantee identical outcomes. And this is where statistics can start uncomfortable conversations. Research by the U.S. Sentencing Commission has found substantial differences between sentences imposed on men and women after accounting for various case factors. That doesn't automatically prove that every individual sentencing difference is discrimination. Cases differ. Criminal histories differ. Charges differ. Circumstances differ. But disparities raise legitimate questions about whether justice is being applied consistently. And here's the key point. Equality isn't supposed to mean special treatment for men. It means men shouldn't receive unfair treatment either. And nowhere does fairness matter more than when somebody accuses you of committing a crime. Because your next right could literally save your freedom. 6. Innocent until proven guilty. Someone accuses you of something terrible. Your friends hear about it. Your employer hears about it. Social media hears about it. And suddenly, people start treating the accusation like a conviction. But legally, accusation and guilt are not the same thing. Fair trial protections include one of the most important ideas in modern justice, the presumption of innocence. If you're accused of a crime, a fair system provides protections around the process. You should know what you're accused of. You should have an opportunity to defend yourself. You should have access to legal assistance under the applicable law. You should be able to challenge evidence and witnesses according to the rules of that legal system. And you shouldn't be convicted simply because somebody decided you look guilty. Think about why this matters. The government has police, investigators, prosecutors, forensic laboratories, prisons, and enormous resources. One individual doesn't. Due process exists partly because that power imbalance is enormous. And that brings us to the situation where many men panic and accidentally make things worse. 7. The police are questioning you. Your heart is racing. An officer asks, "Where were you last night?" Then another question. Then another. What should you do? Here's where internet legal advice becomes dangerous. Because your exact rights depend on where you live and whether you're being questioned, detained, arrested, or treated as a suspect. But across many democratic legal systems, two principles are incredibly important: protection against compelled self-incrimination and access to legal counsel. In practical terms, don't assume you're required to answer every question simply because someone in authority asked it. Don't lie. Don't physically resist. Don't start giving a dramatic explanation because you're nervous. Find out what your local law requires. And when appropriate, ask for legal advice. Using a lawyer isn't an admission of guilt. It's using the system exactly as it was designed to be used. But there's another courtroom where men often feel completely powerless. And this one can hurt far more than losing money. 8. When your relationship ends, but fatherhood doesn't. Imagine coming home. Your relationship is finished. It's painful. It's messy. But then you hear the sentence you've been terrified of. You're not seeing the kids. For many fathers, this is where panic begins. Family law varies enormously between countries, so there is no universal rule saying a father automatically receives 50% custody or a particular amount of contact. But many legal systems place enormous emphasis on something called the best interests of the child. And notice what that doesn't say. The best interests of the mother or the father. The child. Courts may consider things like stability, safety, existing relationships, caregiving, education, living arrangements, and each parent's ability to meet the child's needs. So if you're a genuinely involved father, document it. School runs, doctor appointments, parents' evenings, sports, homework, daily routines, messages concerning the children. Not because parenting should become some giant legal spreadsheet, but because courts deal in evidence. You know you love your children. Your friends know. Your family knows. But a judge doesn't know you. And if your relationship with your child becomes disputed, evidence matters. And that connects directly to another important principle. The right to respect for private and family life appears in various human rights frameworks and regional legal systems. But it doesn't mean a parent automatically wins every custody dispute. Family rights can be restricted where legally justified, including to protect children. The important point is this: your relationship with your children is legally significant. And if you face a serious custody dispute, get proper family law advice early. because waiting until everything explodes can make an already difficult situation far harder. 9. The workplace could literally kill you. Now imagine something completely different. You're working on a construction site. Someone tells you, just get it done. But you look at the situation, and something is seriously wrong. Maybe the equipment isn't safe. Maybe the procedure is dangerous. Maybe somebody could die. What do? This matters particularly to men because globally, men are heavily represented in many dangerous industries. Construction, mining, fishing, transport, agriculture, heavy engineering, manufacturing. Your paycheck shouldn't require you to gamble with your life. International labor standards recognize the importance of safe and healthy working conditions, and some national laws provide specific protections for workers who remove themselves from serious danger. But again, the exact law depends on your country, which means the worst possible strategy is guessing. Know your workplace safety laws. Know your reporting procedures. Know your whistleblowing protections. And document serious concerns appropriately. Because if something goes wrong, my boss told me to do it, may not undo the consequences. 10. Your right to be a father. Now here's something fascinating. For generations, society told men, provide, work, earn, protect. But increasingly, many fathers are saying, I don't just want to pay for my child's life, I want to be there for it. And parental leave laws reveal enormous differences between countries. Some countries provide substantial paid leave, specifically encouraging fathers to spend time with newborn children. Others provide considerably less. And in the United States, eligible workers at covered employers can receive job-protected leave under the Family and Medical Leave Act. But federal FMLA leave is generally unpaid, which creates an obvious problem. You technically have time available, but can your family afford for you to take it? This shows something incredibly important. A principle existing internationally doesn't mean every country implements it the same way. Your actual legal protection comes from the law that applies where you live. And we're about to see an even more dramatic example. 11. One legal obligation that can depend on being male. Military conscription. In some countries, men can legally be required to register for military service or serve. Take the United States. Men aged 18 through 25 are generally required to register with the Selective Service System, subject to the applicable rules and exceptions. Women currently aren't required to register. Think about what that means. We've just discussed equality and non-discrimination, yet national laws can still impose different obligations based on sex. Whether you believe that's justified or unfair is a much bigger debate. But it exposes an important truth. Universal principles and national laws don't always fit together neatly. And that brings us to perhaps the biggest lesson in this entire video. 12. Your rights aren't magic words. Knowing your rights doesn't mean shouting, "I know my rights!" at a police officer. It doesn't mean quoting random articles from the internet. And it definitely doesn't mean watching 3 TikToks and deciding you're now a constitutional lawyer. Real legal power comes from understanding 3 things. What right exists? What law actually protects it where you live? And how you legally enforce it. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Having rights on paper doesn't guarantee they'll never be violated. Sometimes systems fail. Sometimes people abuse authority. Sometimes bias exists. Sometimes somebody simply doesn't know the law. That's why evidence matters. Documentation matters. Legal representation matters. Appeals matter. Complaints procedures matter. And knowledge matters. 13. The most dangerous legal myth. Remember that promise from the beginning? Here's the mistake. People hear about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and think, if somebody violates one of those articles, I'll sue them under the UDHR. Not so fast. The UDHR is enormously influential, but it isn't itself a universal domestic cause of action that automatically lets you sue somebody in your local court. Instead, you need to understand how those principles appear in the law that actually governs you. That could mean constitutional protections, human rights legislation, employment law, criminal procedure, family law, anti-discrimination legislation, workplace safety law, or international treaties implemented through domestic systems. That's where theory becomes power. Final message. So here's what I want you to remember. You might never be arrested. You might never enter a custody battle. You might never be discriminated against. You might never have an employer pressure you into doing something dangerous. And hopefully, you never will. But life can change unbelievably quickly. One phone call, one accusation, one relationship breakdown, one workplace incident, one knock on the door. And suddenly the legal system isn't something happening on television anymore. It's happening to you. And at that moment, anger isn't enough. Confidence isn't enough. Being a good person isn't enough. You need knowledge. You need evidence. And sometimes, you need a lawyer. Your rights aren't weapons to attack other people with. They're safeguards. Boundaries placed around power. A reminder that whether you're a father, a worker, a husband, a defendant, a victim, or simply a man trying to get through life, you are not legally invisible. Know the rights that apply where you live. Know when to stop talking. Know when to document what's happening. Know when to challenge something. And most importantly, know when to get professional legal help. Because the worst possible time to start learning your rights is 5 minutes after you needed them. Now I want to know something. Which of these rights do you think men understand the least? Police encounters? Father's rights? Workplace protections? Equal treatment? Put your answer in the comments. And tell me what country you're watching from, because the differences between legal systems could make the comments on this video incredibly useful. And if you know another man who doesn't understand his legal rights, send him this video, because one day, this information might matter far more than either of you expect. Know your rights, protect yourself, and never confuse being uninformed with being powerless.